Quiet, silent, all is still.
Hi, I'm here to talk about mixing down a song that was recently performed at our church at our Christmas Eve service. The song is The Fullness of Time. It was written and performed by Josiah Choi, 12/24/2018 at Prior Lake Baptist Church. And I had the pleasure of mixing it live and recording it when it was done. And I wanted to do a mix down for Josiah, and I wanted to try out some things that I've learned. And I think it's a beautiful song, and I want to just talk about my approach to it and some of the things I did and who I've learned from. But first, I wanted to give you an idea of how it was recorded.
Darkness
So we listen to Josiah sing in the background there.
withered and fair.
So from an equipment standpoint, we recorded basically two tracks live right from the stage. Josiah's voice, which was a wireless headset. It was a Elite Core HSO9. That's an omnidirectional headset mic. It's a $189 mic. It was into a Sennheiser belt pack, and then into our front of house board, which is a Allen Heath Q24. The guitar Josiah's playing is a Taylor guitar. It has the pickup that came with the guitar when you purchased it from Taylor, and that is the guitar sound that we're getting. So basically a mono voice and a mono guitar track. You will notice in the mix, if you're looking at it here, that there is a stereo room mic. That was basically recorded with two Akai ACM 100. Those are electric condenser microphones. They're pretty old. They're about I'm going to say from the 1970s, so they're probably almost 50 years old. Those microphones are certainly 40 years old at least. They're a electric condenser, so they do have a battery in them because they're old quarter-inch high impedance microphones. So they actually have to run them through a transformer to put them into the mixer. But I was able to pick them up on eBay for about $50, and I really liked the sound of them. They're a great condenser mic for a low cost. I use them for just capturing the room sound of all of our services at front of house. I have them in an XY stereo pickup pattern. So that was the sum total of it in terms of the recording. So not a lot of content there in terms of different inputs. We didn't have multiple mics on the guitar or multiple fancy studio mics on Josiah's voice. Just the headset mic that he wore that night. And as I sat and listened to it, a couple of things that I think that make a great recording, first and foremost, is a well-written and well-performed song. And Josiah certainly has that here. And when you have a well-written and well-performed song, the rest of it really becomes a matter of just don't screw it up. And that's really the way I felt when I heard Josiah do it in practice before the service. The thought I had was, when I'm mixing this live, just make sure it's clear, clean. Don't try and overdo it. Let the song stand on its own, and that's exactly what we did. And it's also a similar approach I've taken here. So with that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the mix down. So I'm going to be quiet here a minute, let you listen to it a little bit, and then we're going to talk about how I treated the guitar, how I treated the vocal, and that's pretty much it.
Quiet, silent, all is still. The Father, eternal, sets forth His will. The fullness of time had come. Light poured around Him. The world was born. It was a silent night, and all was well when the fullness.
All right, so let's go back and listen to that guitar at the beginning. Stop it here. And what we're going to do is, you'll notice I have a guitar left and a guitar right, and then those are combined into a guitar stereo bus that then has a couple of other effects on it. But I wanted to talk about this guitar left and guitar right. Because with just the electric guitar pickup on the electronic pickup in the guitar, it doesn't give us a stereo signal. So how do we achieve that? And there are a lot of different approaches that I've read and seen online and in books. Many of them use some sort of delay and or chorusing effect. Those are okay and they work, but they have the challenge of introducing phase error and cancellation, comb filtering, if you ever listen to it in mono and when you combine them. One of the points of the video, this particular video, is I'm not a great mixer at this. I've learned a lot from a lot of other people, and what I want to impart, the point I want to make is, if you want to do this, you've got to avail yourself of the talent that's out there that are truly professionals and that do this for a living, and they have a lot of great advice. And the first one, someone who I've watched a lot of their content, they produce a tremendous amount. I can't keep up with all of it, but that's Dave Pensado of Pensado's Place. And he had a little 4-minute video on a cool little stereo trick that he used for doing stereo out of a mono track. And that's the technique I've used here. And so let me show it to you, because it's one that I really like. Let's listen to that intro. And if you're listening with headphones or in a stereo environment, you'll hear the stereo effect on the guitar. All right, so what I've done, and I'm going to play it now without the stereo effect on. Now I'll turn it on. Turn it off. Here the guitar comes right into the middle. And then just to show you what it sounds like in mono, we still have a great guitar sound. No weird comb filtering. So how are we doing this? It's very simple. It's using EQ of all things. So let's just pull up these 2 EQ filters, and I'll talk about it as I turn down the sound. We'll let the guitar play underneath. Basically, the technique is you do 2 different EQ curves that are complementary. So they're symmetrical and complementary to each other. So on the left track here, you see I have a boost above 0 here in the low mids, and then a cut in the highs. Conversely, of about 3 dB. This is the 3 dB and then minus 3 dB here. And if you look at the right side, I have a cut in that same area of the lows to mids, and then a boost in the highs. So where this one is cutting, I'm boosting, and where this one is boosting, I'm cutting. And that gives us a different frequency element in each side that gives us that stereo image. It's not time delayed. We're not shifting it in time to do it. It's just simply using the EQ. And the beauty of it is when you sum it in mono, basically the 2 EQ curves cancel out and you get a flat guitar sound. So that's step one, and all the credit goes to Dave Pensado. I don't know if it was original with him, but that's who I learned it from. Great technique that I really like, because it doesn't introduce some of the other problems that delay type approaches can introduce.
A great thing for me.
If we continue on the guitar, I guess we'll look at. I then have some dynamic equalization on the overall guitar. Particularly at the high end, there were some notes that when they were plucked were a little harsh, and using a dynamic EQ up here at the high end, or multiband compression would be similar, allows me to reduce the high EQ when those notes are being plucked that are harsh, but when they're not, it keeps the high end intact. So there you can see it really took a big cut out. So I'm doing some dynamic EQ, a little bit of warmth into the bottom end here. Again, the EQ on the left and right are complementary, and the goal there is to sum them to a flat. So yeah, there you can see some of that dynamic EQ really reaching down and softening some of those notes that are being played there. So some dynamic EQ on it, and then single click. I'm going click happy. Just a simple EQ. This EQ, or not EQ, goodness me, compressor. So some simple compression just to even it out and smooth out the volume. You know, one of the things of live playing is it tends to be carry a lot more emotion, and we don't want to squelch that emotion, but we also want to tame it a little bit for the live or for the recording and reproducing it, just to make it a little easier to mix. And that's what this plugin is doing. These are all free plugins, by the way. There are no plugins used on this mixdown that are ones that you would purchase. So some EQ, and then some reverb that I like. I'm particularly partial to this wide plate sound. It does give it a little bit of stereo in the reverb signal. So the reverb itself contains some stereo imagery, which helps with that stereo imaging, but it doesn't do anything to the dry sound, right? To the main sound coming through. And in fact, I've got the dry sound muted. So some wide reverb that it adds to the guitar there. So that's the guitar treatment. Let's talk about the voice a little bit.
Quiet, silent, all is still. The Father, eternal, sets forth His will. The fullness of time had come.
Let's solo
Light poured around
voice
Him.
here.
The world was born. It was a
Pull it back a little bit while we talk. So I haven't done a lot. I played around with some tuning, but doesn't really need it, and it didn't help. If anything, it added weird artifacts. So you can see on the EQ here, I've notched out some harshness in the middle, frequencies there, but basically low pass, high pass. All right, well, I did that backwards. High pass and low pass. Some boost in the high end to give a little bit more presence, and just cut out a little bit of hollowness at the low end. Not a lot of dramatic EQ, right? About +4 here and about -2 here. We can turn that off. Turn up the volume.
His blood for all, when the fullness of time would come.
So it just gives it a little bit more presence and a little bit more warmth. The next thing is a compressor that I put on his voice.
Angels foretelling Emmanuel.
Again, the main idea here is just to give it some smoothness and evenness in the mix.
Conceiving
bring that volume under control. That's the main thing I was trying to
do. The fullness of time had come.
The next two work in conjunction. These two are there to act as a de-esser, to soften some of the S's. As Josiah was singing, I noticed that some of the S's came across pretty harsh, and particularly when I boosted the high frequencies to get the presence, it really made some of the S's pop. So we just running some dynamic compression here. I've got two of them, one here that's doing a fairly broad band of compression up here, band 4. You can see starting, at about 4K and going all the way up. And then I have a separate one that's a very narrow notch here, band 2, just to give us a little bit of additional cut on those S's. So more general on the high end and then very specific on the S's. So if we turn that off,
Why look and marvel? He will return again. The Lamb now, a lion.
Of course, there's no S's.
The King of Kings. The fullness of time will come when God will send forth His Son to reign. The fullness of time will come. Fullness of time will come. Fullness of time.
Hear that S in fullness.
Fullness of time will come.
Turn on these.
Fullness of time
just softens it a little bit. All right, so get through the intro here.
The fullness of time.
And then I've added some reverb in on his voice too, again using that wide plate reverb with the dry output muted.
The world was born. It was
now, let's talk about one other thing that I'm doing. I've got these stereo room mics here. Let's I'm gonna let you listen to what that sounds like. Turn off you. Let's get to where he's singing. So again, that was recorded directly right at front of house. XY configuration with 2 electric condenser mics. And but what we're doing on that is, you can see here, I'm feeding his voice with a sidechain into this compressor. So if we look at the compressor, the detector input is actually this auxiliary input. And if you listen to it, notice that when he's singing, the room mic gets quiet. And again, the whole idea behind this, and I credit to Warren Huart on YouTube, Produced Like a Pro. Got this idea from him in terms of using sidechain compression on your reverb. And what I'm using this stereo room mic as basically as reverb. Our particular auditorium has about a 2.6 second reverb time, so it adds a lot of natural reverb to the sound. So I'm using it here in this mix down just to give us some I'll say natural reverb from the actual room that the song was performed in. And by using the compression on it this way, when Josiah is singing words, it keeps the reverb from swarming around the words and making the words muddy. It keeps the words and the diction clear, but as the phrasing ends, it allows that reverb tail to come up and to kind of bring up the room, and then it also brings it up like now on the guitar, because the sidechain is voice only. So when you listen to just that stereo room mic, you know, with the compressor on, it sounds kind of weird, but when you mix it in with everything else, it really gives us a nice sound. So what I'm going to do now is start us over, and then we're going to listen to it with the sidechain compression turned on and off. I won't adjust the volume on the stereo room mic, just turning the compression on and off, and you'll hear the difference.
For his name shall be Jesus, his gospel is peace. He who is mighty has done a great thing for me. The fullness of time will come.
All right, I just jumped us back to the beginning. Here we go.
The Father eternal sets forth his will. The fullness of time had come. Light poured around him. The world was born. It was a silent night.
So you can hear the reverb while that room sound, while he's actually enunciating the words.
Had come. silent, all is still. The Father, eternal, sets forth His will. The fullness of time had come. Light poured. The fullness of time had come. Light poured. The fullness of time had come. 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 The fullness of time had come.
Well, hopefully you get the idea there. So really, that's all I've done. I do have a plugin over here that does a little bit of stereo widening. I do have a little bit of compression. I'm hitting the master bus just with a little bit of compression. A little bit of EQ on the master bus, not much. It's very subtle. And then just a limiter to bring the level up to being a good level without it clipping. So that's really it. And again, the main point I wanted to make is not that I'm some great mixer, but that if you want to learn mixing, learn from others. There's a lot of great content out there. To the extent that this mix sounds good, I owe it to others, not to my own brilliance. Even sounds arrogant saying that. I owe it to others. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. I think what I'm going to do is, at this point in time, I'm going to turn this mic off, rewind the song, and just let it play through so you can enjoy this beautiful song without my interrupting. And thanks to Josiah for letting me record it. Again, Josiah Choi is the author and performer of this particular song, The Fullness of Time. And with that, let's listen to it.
A virgin conceiving incarnate. Quiet, silent, all is still. The Father, eternal, sets forth His will. The fullness of time had come. Light poured around Him. The world was born. It was a silent night, and all was well when the fullness of time had come. Ages were passing and death now ruled. Darkness abounded, men withered and failed. But the fullness of time would come. The offspring would crush the head of our sin. A holy lamb would shed His blood for all when the fullness of time would come. Angels foretelling Emmanuel, a virgin conceiving incarnate God. The fullness of time had come. His name shall be Jesus. His gospel is peace. He who is mighty has done a great thing for me. The fullness of time had come. for my iniquities. Jesus, Creator, cursed on a tree. The fullness of time had come. The death of the firstborn has ransomed me, and the life of my soul with him is raised eternally. The fullness of time had come. Why look and marvel? He will return again. The Lamb now, a Lion, the King of Kings. The fullness of time will come when God will send forth his Son to reign. It is a silent night when all will be well, when the fullness of time will come. For his name shall be Jesus, his gospel is peace. He who is mighty has done a great thing for me. The fullness of time will come.